Yo, what's up, Mothafro? Back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about how to write the two M&T essays for UPenn M&T. I get a lot of questions from students essentially asking like, how should I approach this? I'm not really sure. So we're going to go into that today, going to give some general advice and some do's and don'ts for each one. So the first prompt, I'm just going to read it, explain how you'll use the M&T program to explore your interest in business, engineering, and the intersection of the two. So essentially this essay is asking you for kind of why are you interested in M&T basically? Why are you interested in business engineering, and how are you going to use the program to explore that interest? Pretty much the why M&T essay that every college has. And I think that my first pieces of advice in the do section are really be direct and honest. Why do you want to go to M&T? Like, why are you interested in business engineering? If you're applying to the program, you should have some sense of why you want to apply to the program. Generally it's not random, although sometimes there are things you don't want to say, which is understandable. You know, some people are like, I'm just trying to get the bag, like, which is understandable. And that's honestly why a lot of people are applying to most colleges, myself included. Just kidding. But like, basically, I think being honest about your interest, and if you don't know what that is, if you don't know, or you don't have a great answer outside of like, I just thought the program was cool, that's okay. Like a lot of people, it's a cool website. Like I get it. I fell prey to like the website looking sparkly too. And now I'm here. No, I'm just kidding. But like, I think that, basically kind of finding that reason for yourself before you even start writing is really important. Second piece of advice is really answer the prompt. That's kind of self-explanatory, but you'd be surprised like how difficult it is. I think I didn't even answer the prompt well the first time I wrote my essays. If you guys didn't know, I transferred to M&T, so I actually didn't get in on my ED application and then got into Wharton ED and then transferred to M&T after my first year. So there was a difference. There was a very big difference in my first two essays, and a lot of these are from my own essays, and a lot of them are from essays that I've read from other students who've gotten in or who haven't gotten in, etc. Anyway, I think that answering the prompt directly, just explaining, like, I want to use M&T, like, I have this goal, I have these interests in business and engineering for XYZ reasons. I want to use M&T to explore that. And there are a number of ways you can go about that. M&T is so broad. There's like 12 majors in engineering, like 20 majors in Wharton, whatever. You can do a lot of different things, and there's no one right answer. It's really tailored to like whatever your experience is. And people always ask like, what's the typical M&T student? Maybe I'll make another video on this, but like, there's no typical student. I feel that M&T really tries to get a range of students with a range of interests. It's only 50, 55 kids. With so few people, you really get, diverse interests. Although AI has been a very common thread, I think if you have that interest in those ECs, you can write about it. And if you don't, you're not at any disadvantage. You might even be more interesting for standing out. But with that being said, I think really answering the prompt directly, just saying, I want to join M&T to, like, for example, I'm into biomedical engineering. I'm into, like alternative meats. And I want to work in a lab doing that. But I also want to bring that to market, since the biomedical engineering side is a little bit focused on the engineering and research. And really the important part with the lab-grown meats is, one, yes, making them taste good, but two, making sure that they can get to market, that they can get to consumers, stealing that market share from the strong meat industry, learning how to market. Maybe you want to market to meat eaters. Maybe you want to like take a unique approach and talk about your experience with that. I worked in a lab and I worked for a company, I did an internship, or maybe I just worked on a personal project and I was really thinking about how you can market to meat eaters. That's the approach that Impossible Burger took. And you could write a really great essay about that. So I really think that answering the prompt directly and kind of in that manner is another thing necessary. Talk about your future goals. Kind of as I mentioned in that example that I gave, you're really talking about how you want to, in the future, bring alternative meat to industry. That's your goal, right? And that really makes it easy for someone to get behind you. If I can see what your goal is, I can really get behind you. And like, if I don't know where you're going, you're aimless, I don't want to put blind faith into a black box of a student and say, I hope something good comes out of this. Like, of course, students are going to do great things, but just as a persuasive tactic in general, talking about your future goals. Simon Sinek has a great TED Talk on Start With Why that I recommend to like most of my students to watch, because it really shows you how you inspire people and how you can talk with people. But I'll leave that to Sinek, the much better orator than than me on that issue. I mean, like, to talk about that. I mean, his TED Talk is great, like really wonderful. So I think that, starting out with your future goals or talking about them early on and making it clear is actually pretty important. Of course, they don't expect you to have everything. And some students are like, oh, but I don't really know. I'm like worried. I don't know where I want to go. I'm kind of aimless. That's fine. Programs and colleges in general are understanding of you being a high schooler, you being like 17, 18, you not really knowing where you want to go, what you want to do in the next 30, 40, 50, 60 years. That's fine. But having some ideas, like having some passion, I really want to, like, just as a person, me personally, like not even M&T, I want to put my, my backing behind someone that's passionate and that I'm sure is going, like, that has a path of some sort. If I tell you to like do a project and you just say, well, I'm going to do it versus like, or like not even a project, like you don't even have a project. Like you don't even have the future project in mind. You're just like, I'm going to work on something in the sphere of this. Like if you went to a VC and like said, I'm raising funding for like some general thing in the biomedical engineering sphere or in the electrical engineering sphere or whatever, versus like, here's my plan. Like here's the project. I don't have everything sorted out, which most startup founders don't. But I have a couple of ideas on how to proceed, and here's how I want to use your funding to work on those ideas. That's kind of a good way to structure that. And of course, colleges, as I've mentioned in my other videos, colleges exist to develop you. They don't exist to like take you as you are and like put you to work, right? It's not like a job. You don't need to have all the skills or all the like answers, but you do need to have like some goal in mind, or you should at least. Talk about what's really important to you. That kind of plays off of talk about your future goals. Talk about why it's important to you. Hearing a goal is great, but if I see why it's important to you, again, quoting Simon Sinek, people don't buy what you do, they buy what, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And really talking about what's important to you is, I think, another way to give your goals and your passions just that extra oomph. And there we go. Talk about your passions as the last piece of advice. I mean, as the director of M&T, like Professor Alon says, like, this is public advice that he's given. Like, if you want us to know about something, write about it in your essays. Like, he gave this advice in the transfer session for M&T. If you really want us to know about something, write about it in your essays. Like, colleges don't have a lot of time to read all the things you put in your application, but they do read your essays. And if it's really important to you, they'll read it. Also talk, if you have projects, I would say, this is more generic advice for M&T, but if you have projects, I would say definitely include some link, some way to get to those projects in your application. Talk about them. Make sure they've been something continued over time. This is a little bit more specific advice, but like, don't talk about one-off projects that you gave up after like some hackathon or like MNTSI as like your big thing. You should have something you've been working on for like a year or 2 years, or even longer, that you're really passionate about. In terms of the don'ts, I think I really, really fell into this my first time applying to M&T, and I see it very commonly. But don't talk too much about what M&T offers without talking about like how you're going to use it specifically. So like, it's like saying M&T has 2,500 alumni that are so great, and it has 50 to 55 students with such a small cohort that really, help the learning environment or make it easy to like meet people. And M&T really has the integration lab, which is really great in funding through innovation fund and through like entrepreneurship award. M&T knows what its benefits are. You don't need to tell M&T what it's good at. Like, they're the ones that put forward these programs. They know what they're good at. You need to explain how you're going to use it and why it's like essential to your goal. I like going off the alternative meat example. Alternative meat requires a lot of research, requires a lot of funding, and M&T offers unique funding opportunities that will help me propel my startup into that sphere, or something along those lines. Or like M&T's integration lab is an opportunity for me to have that year to work on a project where I think that I'm generally really busy during college and I'll be doing research, but I really want to work on something myself, uniquely. I want to start up like something. And I think that year that I have with the integration lab with dedicated advice from the staff, is really something that will help me will help me push into the future with my idea for alternative meat. Or M&T offers the 50 students, 55 students in that small cohort of people with interest in entrepreneurship would really help me find co-founders, find people to work with, find people with similar ideas. So I think that talking really about what M&T offers with regard to how you're going to use it specifically is how you should approach this, and not just like writing an ad for M&T, which is kind of what I did my first time. And writing an ad is like to M&T, like maybe they'll hire you for their marketing department, but not for college, unfortunately. Maybe, but take you in for college, develop you as a marketer, make you an S tier marketer, and then have you market for them. That's a startup idea if I've heard one. I should pitch that to M&T. Just kidding. But anyway, back to the point. Another don't flex too hard. You need to flex a little bit. You need to mention the projects that are important to you, but you should do it through the lens of this is something that's really important to me. This is my passion. You shouldn't just say I did X, Y, Z, alpha, beta, gamma, like whatever. You should be talking about things that are important, things that are relevant, and also talk about the projects that you spent a lot of time on. I mean, you spent a lot of time on the projects. Why wouldn't you, talk about it? You put in all these years of effort and all these hours of effort. You should at least talk about it. It should be something you're passionate about. If you spent, thousands of hours, hundreds of thousands of hours on your project. So talk about it, and talk about, how M&T will develop it or take it in the future, take it to the next step. I'm not interested in accepting people that, I am interested in accepting people. Let me be clear. I am interested in accepting people that are super passionate. I'm not literally accepting people, but you guys know what I mean. But I'm not interested in accepting people that have done, like there are so many accomplished high schoolers around the nation and around the world. M&T gets a lot of international applicants. We have a lot of international students in the program. And really, it's not as interesting if someone's done like a number of cool things. There are a certain subset of students that have just done such great things that doesn't really matter. Like just talk about that. Doesn't matter if you flex. You're crazy enough that I need you anyway. You're going to do great things in the future. But for us commoners, I think that talking through the lens of like, this is something that I'm passionate about, and not thinking that you're so much more it's not that you think you're so much more impressive than other people. It's just that everyone has cool projects and it's hard to judge them head to head unless there's some sort of like awards, recognition on like a very large scale, like national scale, like news articles written like Forbes, whatever. So with that being said, I think flexing too hard is a mistake. I think you should really talk about how you're going to use the program in the future, not what you've done in the past. Like, unless if you've done some really, really crazy things in the past, that warrants a lot of space. But like, flex a little bit, talk a little bit about what you did, talk about what you went through, a paragraph or 200 words, but like make sure you connect it to the rest of the essay. And then don't spend too long telling stories without answering the prompt. This is another mistake I made. I talked about Archimedes and how he was like both an engineer and a businessman my first time applying, or like how he, not businessman, but how he was like an engineer and like a mathematician rather, and was able to combine like these theoretical concepts with like the physical doing. And that's a very common type of thing people write about. I don't remember if he was a polymath in general. Like he just did a lot of things. And like storytelling isn't that interesting because how am I explaining how I'll use M&T to explore my interest in business, engineering, and the intersection of the two? Where in that is the story important? Unless the story very directly connects to why I want to do business and engineering, or how I'm going to use M&T to explore that interest, which, explain how you use M&T to explore that interest should be like at least 200 words, like 300 words of the essay. Like, that's like half the prompt pretty much. So I think talking about, maybe you could get away with like 150 to like 250. But my point is that telling a story and not really talking about your interests like directly, like you can just be direct. You don't like, we're engineers. We're not part of the college, of arts and sciences. And we're not looking for, creativity is good and writing skill is good. But at the end of the day, engineers care about your skill. They care about what you're going to do in the future since it's a college. But in general, they care about like they just want it direct, like it's to the point. There's no you don't need to beat around the bush. And you only have so many words. It's really inefficient to talk about stories. Storytelling isn't a bad medium in general in like a novel and even in articles and like things like that. Storytelling is fine. It's just that you have such limited words. You really need to talk about yourself and your actual passions, like legitimate. You can condense stories into like 3 to 4 sentences of like actual results and like things. And those are really important. So I think telling a story is good for explaining why you're interested in something, and, maybe concluding with a story is fine, but or tying it back to that same story in the denouement, but don't talk too long about it. You like I said, you're very limited. Let's move on to the second prompt. This one has similar advice. Describe a problem that you solved that showed leadership and creativity. I will say in general, this prompt I think is a little bit less important to M&T. It's 250 words, it's shorter, and kind of your big achievements will already be hashed out in the first essay, I think. But it's interesting to see what people write in this. The transfer essay, for reference, only has the first essay as the requirement. You don't have to write the second one, but it's the same essay. But like, it's still interesting to see what kids come up with. I've seen some interesting kind of takes on this. So do's, I think, honestly, similar rules to the first essay. I think you have a bit more flexibility in the storytelling type, or like storytelling, like of this essay. Less proof is needed. You're describing a problem that you solved. You're not talking about your interests and your passions. You're talking about some issue that you saw and that you took creative lead on to like solve. And in that, there's just extra creativity. And certain essays lend themselves to creativity better. I think the why X essay, why Penn, why Stanford, why MIT, whatever. I think those essays are like some of the least creative. I mean, there's still creativity, but it's less about storytelling, more about your concrete goals. Here you have a little bit more flexibility to tell a story. Don't feel as bad. 250 words isn't that much space anyway, and it only says describe a problem. You only have to talk about one thing. So storytelling is fine. Again, don't talk only about stories, but you guys get the idea. Be strategic and creative in the problem you pick. I think this is a really important thing. Your hard skills are going to be, talked about in other places in the application. And it's not that you can't talk about some nonprofit or whatever you've done in this essay. It's more so that it shows leadership and creativity. That's something that doesn't really come up in your resume. It's going to be like an event or like some, one-off problem more so. And it's going to be something that is like a little bit unique. Like maybe you found a unique way to structure something in your, in your nonprofit or in your school club or in your school, or I don't know. There's a million things you could do. A problem is a very generic statement. With that being said, I think really thinking about the problem, take the time. Don't just start writing. I really think I advocate for college essays to not just start writing until you have really concrete ideas that make sense, and that are thought through a little bit. I think that's just the way to approach this. Otherwise, you're going to spend hours editing words and editing sentence level things when the whole essay content is bad, and it doesn't matter how well you write it. Like the content's bad. So I think in this case, picking a strategic problem, or being strategic and picking like a creative problem, something that you really, you took another route, and just think about it. I know that a lot of us don't think about this on a daily basis. So like you're like, I haven't solved anything that's really unique. But like, as you go into it, like even just a one-off instance is okay. If it's really creative and interesting, you do want to show that it had some like business creativity or some engineering creativity. Both of those are fine. Generally, you're applying to a business and engineering program. Having those types of creativity are good. But even working with people can be argued to have some like business and like group work and management skills. So it's really not a big deal to take a problem that's like out of the scope a little bit. Just be careful on how you frame it. And I think that's the biggest piece of advice with this essay. Along with the first pieces of advice, they're pretty similar. Don't go aimlessly. And that's kind of on the don'ts. Don't pick a really random problem with no point. Don't pick like, I walked to school and there was a pothole and I saw this pothole and I dropped some sand in it because I tripped on it once. Like, that's really random. What does that have to do with what you're doing? You could actually make that interesting if you wanted. Like, I realized that there were potholes, a lot of potholes on my way. So I got like a group of people, and for every pothole that you filled, you got like a lollipop or something, or like, I don't know, like something random. Like I got a bunch of kids in my school, and like for every pothole you filled on the way, or like I petitioned my school, or I asked the management, there are a lot of potholes on the way, it's dangerous for students. And I petitioned the management, or like I went to the management and said, hey, could you guys give some incentive? Could there be some extra credit or something for filling potholes? Like, you could really make anything into a creative problem, and that's a creative solution. Like going to your school's management and trying to get something done. That's like leadership. That's initiative, self-starter, and that's creative. I mean, a lot of people don't talk about potholes and like the pothole issues. And kind of, I think that's something that startups, do well. A lot of startups do well, like picking a specific problem. Like startups that succeed, picking a very specific problem that people actually have and finding a unique way to solve it. So I think we'll end it there. But thank you very much for watching. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop anything in the comments. If you like the video and want to learn more, feel free to reach out to me at mustafadoesstuff@gmail.com and let me know if you want any different types of videos or any ideas. Thanks.